Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of another week of MandoLessons Live. Looks like we got people coming in once again from all over the world. Glad to see you. We got Oregon, Charlotte, West Virginia, Michigan, more Michigan, Minnesota, California, Massachusetts, Yorkshire, London. Good to see you all here. All right. Seems like things are working. Thank you everybody for joining. I'm seeing lots of familiar faces and some new ones as well, I think. But yeah, if you haven't been here before, this is just an hour for you all to ask any questions you might have. I'm happy to play some tunes, answer anything you've been wondering about music and mandolins and all that kind of stuff. Have a lot of fun in the process. Alright, look at all this. Russia, Ohio, China. That's great. That's a new one for me. I think China might be first, at least of people that have shouted out from China anyway, so welcome. Japan, Oklahoma. Oh, this is so good. Thank you all so much for being here. James asks for a request for Going to California. I think you mean the Led Zeppelin song, which I am not going to do because of copyright reasons. I've been getting all kinds of crazy copyright things going on. I'm going to brighten up the screen. The sun just went behind the clouds. I'm just going to do a little bit of this real quick. Let's brighten things up a notch. But, yeah, I've been having a ton of traditional tunes end up getting tagged, so I'm going to steer clear of copyrighted stuff like Zeppelin. But what I will do is I'll play a great tune called Off to California, which is a Irish tune. I don't remember. What is that tune? Yeah, it's an Irish tune called Off to California. A great one. I might be on my website. I can't remember. If not, it's a good one to know. It's a somewhat common tune, at least around here in New England. But I think it's kind of well known in the world of Irish traditional music. Cool. We got Sean is in a field at a festival in the south of England. That's very cool. Hope you're getting to play lots of music. Alabama. Okay, so yeah, so James is saying there's a fiddle tune by that name. But yeah, there's a couple tunes. There's an old time tune. Maybe called Going. I get all my California tunes mixed up. There's one that I'll play that's coming up to the top of my head, and then there's another tune that I can't quite remember. It's in A. It's an old time tune, but I'll play the Off to California that I know, which is an Irish tune, and then do a little more catch up with the chat. Actually, maybe what I'll do here. I've had some questions in the past about playing tenor banjos, so I figured I'd pull out my tenor banjo. Maybe hopefully not blow your ears off. It's kind of a loud instrument. But I'll keep an eye on the audio levels. For anyone who's interested, tenor banjos are cool. 4 strings, tuned an octave lower than a mandolin. Easy to hear in Irish sessions. Used a lot in Irish music. And I've had I know that there's some people who play tenor banjo, so I figured I'd pull that out this week and play a little bit. This would be a good tune to do on it. Off to California. off to California on the tenor banjo, tuned like a mandolin, just an octave lower. So, back to mandolin world. I'm going to catch up with the chat here. I saw some questions fly in that I'm happy to answer. Let's see. It's great to see all you here. Almost 50 people. That's great. Let's see. Request for Liberty. Yeah, I can play Liberty as long as I can remember how it goes. Oh, cool. That's the one you meant, James. Glad I could do it. Hello from Nashville. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. All right. Max says, can you show us how to play tremolo? I can play on 2 strings, but when I play it on 3, it gets harder and strange. Yeah, so that definitely takes some... So I think that's sort of what you're talking about, getting that nice big tremolo in general is sort of that nice rolling sound. And I think the trick, I have a lesson on my website on how to play tremolo. And I would recommend it sounds like you've got it under your fingers, at least, and kind of into your muscle memory for 1 and 2 strings, which is great. That's totally the place to start. Getting that feeling into your right hand takes some getting used to. But so if you're new to tremolo and haven't played and haven't gotten 1 string down, that's definitely the place to start. And watch that video on my website. And if you're trying to expand that out to multiple strings, if you've got 2, you've got the right idea. And what all it is about maintaining that nice fluid, kind of speedy up and down motion, but just widening out kind of the path that your right hand is following. And I think I think maybe starting with 1 string. Let's do this. Let's take a G chord if anyone's got their mandolins handy. Let's start just on the highest string, so the E string on the 3rd fret with our G chord. Get a nice tremolo going. And then widen it out to have the G and, the E string on the 3rd fret and the A string on the 2nd fret. Sounds like this. And we're going to widen it out again with the open D string. Then the open G string as well. So there's a couple things I'm noticing. This is a great question because I haven't really thought about this question a whole lot. One thing I'm noticing is when I'm playing 3 and 4 strings, often I'm giving little sections, like maybe 2 string sections, more attention and kind of going back and forth between. Because as you widen out your hand, it does get harder and harder to maintain that speed that you need to get that sound. But if you listen to what I'm doing, you can sort of kind of pan around through the strings. So I'm not always going... I think, that's something good to practice as well, and working towards that. Just take everything nice and slow. See how slow you can play tremolo without... and still maintaining that sort of sound. And not sort of turning into... But also, just experiment with, hitting those high strings and then coming down to the low strings. And those low strings will ring out as you go. So I think that's one thing to work on is get a couple strings going and then add in another string just for a little bit, and then come back to your higher strings. And really, it just takes time. If you've gotten through 1 and 2 strings, just keep working on 3 and 4, and they'll only get easier as it goes. Great question, though. Hello from Michigan. Awesome. Germany. Dueling banjos. That's another, unfortunately, copyrighted one. But I'm sure there's tablature out there if you're a tab reader. I'm sure there's tons of, it's a popular enough tune that I bet you can find it out there on the Google, or look it up on Mandolin Cafe. A lot of the stuff that if I say, oh, I can't do that because of copyright, take a look on Mandolin Cafe, see if anyone over there has tabbed it out or has a lesson on it or can explain how they do it. There's lots of people who know a lot more tunes and songs than I do over there. So if I can't help you, Mandolin Cafe can be a big help. That's where I go when I have questions. Just gonna catch up with the chat here. Okay, Recovering Bassist says, what do you recommend for pinky stretching exercises? One thing that helped me a lot with pinky exercises is there's a website called jazzmando.com that has some sort of practice PDFs called FFCP, which stands for 4-finger closed position, and it runs you through all these closed position scales. And then scale exercises. Whoa. There we go. And so check that out. It's on jazzmando.com, FFCP. I've got a couple lessons on my website about that in the technique and fundamentals section, about those closed scale positions. And those really give, because there's no open strings, it really gives your pinky a workout. You're using your pinky almost as much as all your other fingers. And really spending a lot of time using your pinky a lot will help you. You know, in a lot of traditional music, you know, Irish tunes, old-time tunes, there's not a whole lot of pinky workout, but it's good to spend a lot of time working on your pinky so that when you use it, it's not going to feel unnatural. So that's a sort of a short answer, is check out Jazz Mando and run through some of those PDFs. They're really pinky intensive. You know, don't do it for hours and hours because you'll just stress out your hands. But do it for 5 minutes, shake out, do something else, come back and do it a little longer. What fiddle tunes, Martin Zell says, what fiddle tunes are best for beginners in jams? If you go to my website, MandoLessons.com, you can sort the tunes over there, the fiddle tunes, by difficulty level. And I've got a whole couple dozen beginner tunes that, at least in my area and the places I've visited, have been very commonly known tunes, so I'd recommend checking those out. It's going to depend on the genre, whether you're playing Irish music or old-time music or a mix. It's going to depend on your geographic location. It depends on, you know, I'm up in New England. If you're out west, it might be a little bit different. If you're in Ireland, if you're in England or another country, it's going to, the tune repertoire is going to be a little different, but I try to pick tunes that are fairly well known around the world on my website. So just sort the tunes on my website by difficulty and look at those beginner tunes. And also look at some of the intermediate ones as well. There's no real hard line between beginner and intermediate and advanced. A lot of it has to do with familiarity. So if you play a bunch of old-time tunes and maybe you know a bunch of intermediate to advanced old-time tunes, and then you try to play an Irish tune, it's a different feeling. So you might need to go back, look at some of the beginner tunes. So look in the beginner and intermediate section of my website, and that should give you plenty to work with. Andrew says, do you remember what song you played at the beginning? Yes, I played, I usually try to say that, I played Billy in the Low Ground. Sounds like this. Wow, great tune, gets played in old time and bluegrass circles. It's if you haven't heard it, I have an old time album just called Solo Man. What is it? It's called Old Time Mandolin. It's on Bandcamp. You can find it through my website, through the store or shop page. I forget what it's called. It's also on my website on MandoLessons.com if you want to learn it. Recovering Bassist says, playing along with you, my instructor really wants me practicing chop chords. Yeah, chop chords can be really helpful, especially if you're gearing towards playing bluegrass. It's good to just spend the hours and totally, play along with everything you can just to get those shapes and changes under your fingers. It's a great thing to do. All right, Josh has been playing Soldier's Joy. Glad to hear it. James says, I saw a great jazz tenor banjo player recently. Seems to be a popular instrument. Yeah, a lot of those tenor banjo players will do this sort of... I don't play this style at all, but it's more like that sort of chord melody. I don't play that style, but I know what you mean. And it's a great sound. TAE 1000 ESD says, when do you apply tremolo to tunes? If you have a slow one, when do you play tremolo, and when do you play single notes? So I don't tend to use a whole lot of tremolo in my playing. When I do add it is 99% of the time on slow tunes, like you said. And within those slow tunes, often I'll play eighth notes or short notes in the tune. So if you have a tune that goes something, let's see, what's a good tune? So maybe your bass melody, I'll just make something up because I can't pull anything into my head. Maybe your bass melody goes like this. So you have short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long. So you have those eighth notes and then quarter or longer notes. I think those would be, I don't know what those longer notes are off the top of my head. But take those longer notes in the tune and use tremolo on those. Or you can try adding it to the short notes as well. Things like that. But just play around with it. You'll find that the longer notes give you more space to really let that tremolo ring out a little bit. Versus the short notes. If you try to tremolo over all the short notes, it starts getting a little muddy. You don't get that defined beat as much. Okay, so Alex CHR says, can you give me some finger exercises that might help with moving around the fret? I assume you mean like around the fretboard, up and down. I would again refer you to jazzmando.com and those FFCP exercises on that website. It's free PDFs. It's super useful. Martin also says, to that answer, check out Bill Monroe. There's your answer. Yeah, Bill is great. Learn some stuff from Bill Monroe, especially in the kind of, if you're looking to move around the fretboard in more of a bluegrass context. Bill would do a lot of stuff out of kind of chord shapes. So if you know your chop chords, nothing in particular, but he would use those chop shapes and pick out little melodies within there. So watching Bill Monroe, if that's the kind of sound you're after. How tight? Oh, my chat just jumped. But where is that? How tight are you holding the pick? Not very tight. Whether I'm playing melody or tremolo. I might grip it a little harder for tremolo, but what I always tell my students is if you drop the pick, you get extra points. because if you're really clamped down on the pick, the sound will come out really kind of stiff, and versus nice loose. When I'm playing and my pick goes through the strings, I'll try to do this. You know, if my pick's coming down to the string, if you were watching it side on, it would do this, where it's kind of going along, it hits the string, and it gets that resistance, kind of bends back with the string, and then it gives the string a little kick at the end. But that only works if you're nice and loose, so it can actually bend in that space that you're holding the pick. And if you're really clamped down, you'll get, like, it'll hit the string and stop, and then chunk through, versus getting a nice rolling action over the strings. And that goes for melody picking, chords, tremolo, everything. Thank you, Victor. You said, nice looking haircut. Yeah, it was springtime here, so it's time to get a haircut and clean up the beard. But then we got a couple inches of snow last night, so it's a little preemptive. Cool. James Seppi from Austin says, been working on Wind That Shakes the Barley. That's a great classic Irish tune. It's a good one to know. Glad you're working through it. Yes, Robert says, a tightly held pick will snag. Loose is correct. I agree with that. Although, there are probably exceptions to the rule. Cool. Cheyenne's here after a couple busy months. Glad you can join us. Prickly thorn, but sweetly worn by the white stripes. I'm not doing any copyrighted material. Unfortunately, it'll get me in trouble with YouTube, but I appreciate the suggestion. Looking that sort of stuff up on Google can often yield some results. Also, Mandolin Cafe can often find you what you're looking for if you're looking to learn those songs. Alex CHR, I hope I'm saying your screen name right, says, can you suggest some different strumming techniques? Yeah, so I have actually a series on my website that I'll point you to rather than going too in-depth with this. In the technique and fundamentals section, I have a whole strum pattern series. I go through a couple things from this sort of what I call the guitar strum or folk strum, to a bluegrass strum, to more of kind of an Irish, I can't effortlessly slide into this, but more of kind of an Irish cross-picked moving bass line. Sound, other cross-picking. That sort of sound. I go through a bunch of those in the strum pattern series in the technique and fundamental section of my website, MandoLessons.com. Ooh, good question. Steven says, I can't recall if you have a lesson, but how about a little bit of John Hardy? That's a great tune. That's one I don't have like a real nailed down melody for. I think of it more of as a song. I know it's kind of a tune that a lot of banjo players will play. I'll see what I can do here, though. John Hardy was a discreet little man. Yada see John Hardy, something more. Yada da 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 da. Something like that. It's not something I can really do a whole lot with. I tend to play that tune more as in the context of a song with a little break here and there, and just try to stick to the melody for the most part. Cool. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. Thanks always, as always, for the super chat. It's much appreciated. Appreciate the donation, and thanks for joining. And glad you can watch it later on. For anyone that doesn't know, if you can't make the whole thing, or you can't make some week, you can always watch these later on. They're archived just on my YouTube channel, so you can watch them in the future if you don't have time now. Catch up with the chatting. This is great. Tons of questions. I'm glad to see all this. Victor says, speaking of strumming, what strum pattern would you use for Wayfaring Stranger? Followed the lesson, but singing and picking is hard. Love to strum and sing and pick the rest without singing. Yeah, so with Wayfaring Stranger, I would use a kind of what I call the guitar pattern strum. I think in my lesson I did it in E minor. I play it in a couple different keys, but I think I did an E minor for the lesson. So I would do something like... I am a poor wayfaring stranger, traveling to wearisome land. There's no sickness, toil or danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there, etc. So that's pretty much just the folk strum. And then from there, so nothing, especially with songs, especially slower stuff like that, I really just stick to kind of you can think of it as kind of boom chuck or guitar strum, bass, and then strum. You can alternate that bass. I go through some of that in the beginner series on my website. Some of the basic guitar strumming patterns, but also in the strum pattern series. Michael says, am I the only one who finds memorizing all the various arpeggios and scales tough? Suggestions? You are. I'll say off the top, right off the bat, that you are not the only one. I'm not particularly good with that stuff myself. I think it depends on what kind of music you play, what you find to be fun as a musician. I think, for myself, I tend to only practice what I use and what I find myself lacking in ability. So at this point in my life, I don't play a whole lot in like E flat. I rarely play in the key of B. B flat sometimes. But D flat, E flat, kind of weird keys. I don't play as much. I used to play some jazz, and I'd run into those keys then. But at this point, I pretty much just play fiddle tunes. Occasional song here and there. But I think for the most part, I'm not in a position where I'm called on to play in weird keys. And if I am, I often am not playing mandolin. I'm playing guitar, tenor guitar, where I'm capoing to match a singer. So I don't tend to practice things that I don't. That said, if you're working up to being like a fluent jazz musician and you want to know how to play in the key of E flat, and knowing all your E flat arpeggios, all that stuff that I can't really keep up with anymore myself, that's totally worthwhile, and by all means stick with it. Probably look up some jazz resources. But if you're looking to be a bluegrass musician, occasionally you'll need to play in E flat, but not for the most part. If you want to just play fiddle tunes, you rarely are going to need to play in E flat. I'd say cross that bridge when you come to it. I find that in the past when I've practiced scales and arpeggios, I've sort of practiced them for their own sake, which hasn't been particularly rewarding to me because I'll practice exercises like that, getting arpeggios in all the keys, but then I never use it in a musical context. And again, this is just my experience. So I've sort of stopped practicing that stuff because I'm not called on to play it. I don't play music that requires it, and I think I can better spend my time learning to play more tunes, or learning a new instrument, or learning a new style of accompaniment, or learning something new off of a record, learning a solo off a record, things like that. And same sort of with learning to play faster. I've gotten to the point where I can play at the speeds that I need to play for dancers and for sort of the context in which I play. I can't play at 150 beats per minute, but I never need to, so I don't really feel the need to practice getting faster at this point. So that's maybe, if you're finding yourself sort of practicing something because you think you need to know how to do it, and you're enjoying it, that's great, and it's great to gain those new skills. But also don't beat the process to death just because you feel like you should know how to do something that you're never really finding yourself using. That's my opinion. And what ultimately, have fun. If you can maximize the amount of fun you're having and the amount of time you can spend playing music with other people and kind of doing the important parts of music, that's the important thing to do. But that said, I don't know a whole lot in terms of techniques to memorize scales and arpeggios. Again, the FFCP, which I've mentioned a couple times already because it's just a great multi-purpose resource. Jazzmando.com, look up the FFCP PDFs and work through those. They go through a bunch of arpeggios, a bunch of closed position scales. That's going to be your ticket, I think. But other people here might as well. Might also have some resources for you. Andrew says B flat chord is hard. So I don't know. There's a couple B flats you can go for. This is one that pops into my head is 3 3 5 6. You might know this A chord 2 2 4 5. Move it up one fret, and you get a B flat. You could also do this chop chord. I think what it's going to require is learning to play either this bar chord. I've got a lesson on my website. It's called Learn to Play Every Major and Minor Chord, and I go over how to play this sort of shape and how to move it around the fretboard. And also I've got lessons on my website on chop chords, which are movable shapes. But I say perseverance is a big thing. You know, when you first encounter a new chord, it's going to be awkward to get into it. Even, you know, after I've been playing for 18 years now, and when I learn a new chord shape that I haven't put my fingers in before, it's always awkward because we get so used to playing the ones we play over and over again. And when you reach a new chord, you just like figure out a way to play that chord a lot. That's sort of my advice anyway. Recovering Bassist says, how do you play chords in B? Sort of same answer. You can play them here, 4 4 6 7, or you can do the chop chord with your pointer finger at the 7th fret on the E string. But check out those lessons I just mentioned on a more in-depth answer to that question. Ryan asked, do I have any F-style mandolins and advice for me with my F-style? I don't know any F-style mandolins. I don't quite know what you mean by advice. I've just always owned A's because they're a little kind of less expensive for the kind of similar model. But F-styles are great. I've played a lot of F-styles that I've loved. But no, I mostly just have this mandolin and an old Gibson oval hole. Also A style. But nothing against F styles. They're beautiful instruments. Cool. Justin just arrived. Glad to have you here. Jason asked, what thickness picks are you using? It looks to be pretty flexible when you just showed it on our finger. So I use a pretty thick pick. It's a 1.5 millimeter. So it's fairly thick. I think what I was sort of trying to say is my fingers move to let the pick flex. You can sort of see my thumb and forefinger spreading apart when it hits my pointer finger of the other hand, which would be the string. The pick moves. Versus something like this, which is what I use on tenor banjo, is a 0.6 millimeter, and that you can bend these quite a bit more bendy. But for mandolin, I use thicker picks. But try a little bit of everything. See what I always say. Picks are a nice, inexpensive way to try out a bunch of different thicknesses and see what feels and sounds best to you. You can get into expensive picks, and they're great picks, but there's a lot out there that you can find for picks that cost under $1, under $2. You got a lot of choices out there. And if you spend $5 on a handful of picks, it's a good way to have a couple different options under your fingers. David says, I bought a Kala tenor guitar, leaving it in CGDA tuning. Great addition to mandolin experience. Yeah, those are cool instruments. I've played one, and I really enjoyed it, but I haven't played a whole lot of them. But yeah, CGDA is a great tuning to have. Mandola tuning. I've got a mandola that's a lot of fun to play. I wish I had more opportunities to play it. Oh, I think I jumped down some here. Try to see. Oh, a little bit of Barlow Knife. I love that tune. I'll play a little bit of Barlow Knife. I'm going to just catch up with the chat here while I can. Trying to get airs and slow marches under my fingers. Awesome. Arthritis in my fret fingers after trying to play chord melody. Any solutions? I would say just, take it slow. Do lots of stretches. Don't overwork yourself. I've had my fair share of kind of muscular and nerve stuff as well. Stand nice and relaxed all the way through your shoulders. I've got some fairly in-depth lessons on like how to hold the instrument, kind of whole body experience. Check those out. Take it nice and slow, and take lots of breaks. Can I play slew foot? Not off the top of my head, unfortunately. Okay, it looks like I jumped around in the chat here a little too much. I'm getting a little mixed up here. I hope I'm answering everybody's questions. The chat is just jumping around on me a lot. Cool. Peggy's heading out. Thank you for joining us. Dark Hollow. I don't really know any of the words to that one. It's a great song, but I would just mumble my way through it. I'll play a little bit of Barlow Knife here. There it is, Barlow Knife. At least there's a couple versions of that. That's John Salyer, old-time fiddle player, more or less his version. But I know there's a couple versions. There's some versions that's got 3 parts and some words. That's nice. But that's how I play it anyway. Steven says, I brought up a pickup conversation a while back. How about your thoughts on acoustic amps? I don't know anything about acoustic amps. I've never played through. The closest I've come is just taking. I got some amp for like $15 when I was in high school. And at times I would take a little like clip-on mic that I had and plug it in through that. I don't know anything about acoustic amps. I would ask on Mandolin Cafe. There's in the equipment section, there's some conversations that I've read, but I don't remember any of the names. It seems like there's some nice sounding little small amps that are out there for just a couple $100 that could be worth looking into. But again, Mandolin Cafe is the place for that. I've never used one myself, but I've been thinking about it. Because you never, it could be a handy thing to have. James says, you ever had any experience playing an octave mandolin? What are your thoughts? I have. So I play a couple octave mandolin scale instruments. I've got the tenor banjo, which is that scale. I've got a flat iron bouzouki. I'll pull it out here just a second. So this is probably the closest thing that I have to an octave mandolin. This is I guess it technically is an octave mandolin because I don't have it strung. Ooh, a little out of tune here. Sort of the main difference between an octave mandolin and a bouzouki is how it's strung, whether it's got octave strung strings like a 12-string guitar. But all of the instruments that I play that are like octave mandolins I tune G, D, A, and then instead of an E, I have a D on top, just like down a whole step. And I play them sort of bouzouki style. So I don't play any long scale octave mandolin style instruments in GDAE. I use them a lot for accompaniment, except for tenor banjo. I tune GDAE. And so I also play tenor guitar, which is a 4-string flat top acoustic guitar that I tune GDAD. But they're super fun instruments to... I just saw that whenever I talk about gear, I've talked about a little bit of gear. I'm not, sponsored by anybody. I buy all my own stuff. Nobody's paying me to talk about anything. I saw that Eastman is recently made like an archtop F-hole A-style. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Octave mandolin for a couple. It's like $500 or $600. It seems really reasonably priced for that sort of. It seems like the lowest price for anything around, and I've played a lot of Eastmans that I've liked. That's got me thinking, but a little more uncommon than your average mandolin, but they're a lot of fun. Let's see here. Cheyenne says, can you do a series on theory specifically for the mandolin? Yes, that is something that I've wanted to do for a really long time. I'm putting it off because it's going to be a lot of work. When I do it, I want to do it right. So it's not on the immediate timeline. It's actually one of my, it's like the end of my Patreon sort of goals of the number of people that are pledging to me. There's sort of a new sort of goal for every couple hundred patrons that help me out on Patreon. And at this point, the music theory one is kind of at the end because it's going to be a lot of time dedicated to that, but I do want to do that. For now, what I would recommend is check out musictheory.net. It's great. It's not mandolin specific, but it's music theory, and it's all free, and it's really well laid out. And then also the theory section, there's like a tips and theory section on Mandolin Cafe that can be super helpful if you have specific questions. There's also, I think, some books out there. Covering Basis says, when you play an instrumental, are you thinking of playing notes off chords or no? Yes, I play a lot out of kind of chord positions. Put this thing down here. You know, so when I'm playing... That's where a lot of my double stops come from, is getting chord shapes down on the instrument and using strings that aren't the melody to play double stops and drone notes. Because if your fingers are in general chord shapes, if you hit another string, it's not going to sound, it's going to sound in tune and a nice additional note to the melody you're playing on top. So I do use a lot of time, and it's a good thing to think about. You know, if you're playing through a tune, any tune from Whiskey Before Breakfast to any fiddle tune, just going through the tune and going G, C, G, D, G, G, C, G, D, G, and kind of having the chord structure running through your head. You know, it's kind of a step-by-step process of learning the melody and then learning the chords, and then playing the melody while thinking about the chords, then trying to kind of put it all together. But the short answer to your question is yes, I think about playing out of chord shapes a lot. John asked for a little bit of Blarney Pilgrim. Definitely, that's a great tune. Footprints in the Snow. That's another copyrighted one. Unfortunately, all that bluegrass stuff is copyrighted, and YouTube is pinning it to me with the copyright these days. Kevin says he's working on Black Rogue and the picking is coming along, but is having trouble with the backing. Yeah, that's a great tune. I want to just get through. Maybe I'll do a little bit of Blarney Pilgrim and then Black Rogue, if I can remember how Blarney Pilgrim goes. the backing of Black Rogue at the end there. I think part of the thing, especially with jigs, is getting that down up down pattern in your fingers. And it also has a lot of kind of quick chord changes. I'd say work through it. Use my play along tracks if you haven't already. Take a look at sort of how the chords fall over the melody. If you look at the sheet music, kind of put all that stuff together, and don't be afraid to really work through it nice and slowly. Would be my biggest suggestion. I'm gonna catch up with the chat again. Esire26 says, I've been playing for 2 years and feel like I'm not progressing. Have learned theory pretty well, but the dexterity and hearing seems to elude me. Any suggestions? It's, it's hard to say without hearing you and without, having a little more information, but they also say I have practiced a lot of tricks. Oh, I've practiced a lot. Any tricks to learn faster? The short answer is check out. There's a great series that I've been reading through. I've kind of got halfway through and stalled a little bit. But if you're into sort of learning how to learn, there's a great series I've been working through on clawhammerbanjo.net called The Laws of Brainjo. It's like banjo except brain, Brainjo. Brain, J-O at the end. And it's really interesting. They talk a lot. The guy is a banjo player, kind of adult learner banjo player. He learned later in life and is also a neuroscientist, and has lots of interesting things to say about sort of the process of learning. Check that out. I've been working through that. But I think, on a less that's, I would say, if you want to go in the deep end, check that out. I think for me, what has been really helpful is finding people to play with, and sort of maximizing the amount of fun I'm having playing. And I think the practice for me that's been the most successful is when I'm really not even thinking about playing as practice, and when I'm not sitting there running scales. And when I'm really like either at a bluegrass jam or a folk jam or a fiddle tune or just playing around with my friends, whether I'm just goofing off or like trying to put something together for a band, anytime you're not feeling like you're sitting there in practice time and you're just kind of playing music and interacting with the people around you that are also playing music, that time flies by, and sort of having that feeling of being in over your head is a really overwhelming feeling, but can be really helpful. If you can keep a positive attitude about it and not get too down on yourself about not being able to necessarily keep up with what's going on around you, and just keep plugging away at it. Find some local jams and just get out there and do it as much as possible. So that's what's helped me. I'd say between those two things, might have a little bit of useful information there, but it's a big subject for sure. All right, one more catch up here on the chat. Any tips on playing mandolin in GDA-D tuning? Yes. What I have another website that I don't add lessons to. It's not like an ongoing website, but I have a website called tenorguitarlessons, all one word, .com. Check that out. It's it's just a beginner series on learning to play in GDA-D. Check it out. It's there. It's all free, just like MandoLessons. I don't add new lessons to it because MandoLessons takes up all my time, but it's there. Banjo Ben has some Mando-specific theory lessons. That's good to know. Cool. He's got a lot of good stuff. Do you have any music from movies? Do you play any music from movies, scores, or soundtracks? I don't. I love that stuff. A good friend of mine is a film scorer, and I love hearing the stuff she creates, and I love listening to the way music is combined with film. But I don't I don't play any myself. Do I use a lot of slides and hammer-ons? A little bit, not as much as some. I really tend my own personal style. I think is built mostly on. I'll do some slides. I don't do a whole lot of hammer-ons. I do a lot of slides. I do a lot of double stops. But hammer-ons, slides, all that stuff is great to know about. All that sort of ornamentation. There's lessons on my website on all of that stuff. Check it out. I think just sort of as I've gone along, I have absolutely nothing against hammer-ons and slides and all the stuff that I don't tend to use as much. But it's just sort of the way I've kind of developed my style over the years. Some of it's kind of stuff that I don't tend to use as much. Kind of like tremolo. There's nothing wrong with adding some of that in. I just don't tend to do it. What was the tune you were playing on the bouzouki? I think I was just noodling. Oh, you have one of those Eastman octaves. Cool. That's awesome. I haven't played one yet, but because they're fairly new, I think. But that's great. I hope to run into one someday. So yeah, but the tune I wasn't playing anything. I think I was just noodling on the bouzouki. But they're definitely good. I use bouzouki a lot for song melody stuff more. That's just something popped in my head. It's Adieu, Sweet Lovely Nancy from the playing of Jeff Davis. Beautiful, beautiful, one of my favorite albums. It's got a bunch of great guitar, octave mandolin, or maybe mandocello, banjo, fiddle. He's a great American folk musician. Yeah, I tend to do more accompaniment style stuff on tenor. Tenor guitar and bouzouki. Alright, I'm going to see if I can just get through these last couple things, but I'm running out of time once again, unfortunately. Any thoughts on keeping yourself from cheating and switching strings in upstrokes when doing alternating right hand pattern? What I recommend is just, play super slow and do some string crossing exercises, just like some cross picking exercises. Doesn't matter what your pattern is, but just make sure your right hand is always going down, up, down, up. Unless you don't want it to. So go nice and slow. There's something else that was in my... Oh yeah, think about your right hand. Once you sort of get the basic pattern into your right hand, see if you can just feel that movement in your right hand as kind of a feeling rather than thinking down, up, down, up. If you can really just feel your hand do like that movement, or if you're playing jigs, just like feeling the physical movement in your hand. And then if your hand alters from that pattern, you'll start to feel that and be like, oh, that doesn't feel right in my hand. And you'll be able to get back on the train. You Are My Sunshine is another one that's copyrighted. It doesn't seem like it should be, but it was written by some guy, Harry. I can't remember his name. It was written in like the 30s, unfortunately. Trying to say it'd be nice if you add the time and named tunes you play on the session. Somebody did that. If anyone wants to go, I don't have time to go through all of them, unfortunately, and do that. Somebody has done that to one of them, and it was great. I really appreciate them doing that. But if somebody wants to take that on as a project and post the timestamps, I'll even add them to the description if you want, or I'll pin your comment to the top. That would be super helpful, but I don't have time to go through, unfortunately, on all my videos. I wish I did. Okay, I gotta wrap things up here. One more question. What is the make of the tenor banjo? It's a Paramount, Lang Paramount, style C. It's kind of like middle of the road style, big heavy thing that weighs like 20 pounds. Yeah, it's a fun instrument. How much does your pick stick out from your fingers as you're playing? About that much. And you can, play around with it. I think you'll find if you've got so much sticking out, it'll really start to flop around. If you have not enough, you'll start dinging up your knuckles. But that feels about comfortable to me. It's kind of hard to see in this background, but my top tip: don't buy overpriced harmonic dampers. Buy a big bag of 3mm rubber grommets for a few dollars, pounds, euros, etc. Yeah. So what he's referring to here is I've got on a bunch of my instruments, you can sort of see them here, these little rubber grommets, and you can buy them for like $5 for a 4 or 8 pack or whatever it is. You can also just buy them in bulk. There's nothing wrong. If you only need a couple, it might make sense to just buy it. But if you got a bunch of instruments, you want to put them on, I bought a bag of 100 of them from like a hardware store for $5 or $6. So if you're getting into the bulk grommet business, that's something to keep in mind. Cool. All right, so I gotta head out, but thank you so much. All right, it looks like there's just one more question, and I apologize if I missed any things. Do you prefer tenor banjo or clawhammer banjo? Both. I wouldn't want to live without either of them. I love playing clawhammer banjo in old time sessions. I love playing tenor banjo in Irish sessions. Have I thought about teaching tenor guitar lessons? Again, tenorguitarlessons.com. I've got some lessons up there, but it's not something I'm going to be updating regularly because I don't have enough time. I wish there were 48 hours in a day. I'd get a lot more done. But yeah, see you all next week. Thank you so much for joining once again, and have a great rest of your weekend. Keep on picking. Get out there and play some music with some buddies. And see you next week. Same time, same place. 12 noon Eastern Time on Saturday. See you soon. Bye-bye.